Welcome to The Current by TreasureCoast.com, where we discuss interesting people, places, and happenings on Florida's Treasure Coast.
Yeah. Well, let's roll into it if you're ready. I mean, Eric, I appreciate you being on.
Sure.
Why don't we start by you just telling the listeners and the people watching who you are and what your background is?
Sure. So, my name's Eric Strazzeri. I'm a retired combat veteran. I was born and raised in South Florida. After the 9/11 attacks, it inspired me to join the Army to fight for our rights and our freedoms, where I rapidly deployed to Iraq. And what I've noticed lately is we're slowly losing those same rights and those freedoms that I went and fought for, and so many died to protect. And all I hear is politicians campaigning, utilizing the same rhetoric without providing any solutions to the problems. And they quickly forget about the promises they made to the people, the small businesses, the seniors, and the veterans in the community. And I'm running to bring integrity, accountability, and transparency to City Hall.
So is and I appreciate that intro to who you are, Eric, and thank you for your service. What are you?
Thank you.
What prompted you to run? Was there anything specifically, or like did you wake up one day and say, "Hey, look, I've just this is a spot that I feel like I need to fill," or was it like a personal calling? What prompted you to run for mayor?
Yeah, so about it was about 2.5, 3 years ago. It was around there. I believe it was 2 years ago when I officially became a candidate for mayor. I was sitting in the hospital room with my son. My son, he just recently passed last year from cancer, but about 2 years ago, he was going through transplants, and it seemed like the doctors weren't listening. The insurance company didn't care, and all they cared about was money. And it really, bothered me. And it just made me feel like, nobody really cares about people anymore or doing the right thing. It's all about, money. And it really bothered me. So I flew back from, Nashville. He was at, Vanderbilt Children's Hospital there, doing treatments at that time. And I said, you know what? If nobody wants to stand up to do the right thing and fight for the people, then I will. And I went to City Hall and I signed up to run for mayor.
Hmm. What about your background? I mean, I know your background, obviously, behind you there. There's a lot of your background's kind of cybersecurity. Obviously, you're in the military. What part of your background do you feel keeps you well equipped? I mean, I'm sure there's some hard skills and some soft skills that you're going to develop in your background. I mean, what makes you prepared for the role?
Yes, sir. So it's a great question. So listen, I was a leader in uniform. I led soldiers in uniform in combat, and when I retired out, I was a leader out of uniform in corporate America. I built cybersecurity operation centers. Where we provide managed security services to Fortune 50 and 100 companies, where I briefed CEOs and boards and executives on a daily basis of their security posture and things that they could be doing better. And I think my entire experience from leading soldiers to leading civilians and training them and showing them the way, and as well as articulating the issues to senior leadership has, pretty much developed me into the leader I am today and that I've been from the beginning. And I think, leadership boils down to just making good decisions. And I've been making good decisions, and I'm going to continue to do so for the people of Port St. Lucie.
Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioned you had moved up here from South Florida, and I'm sure that like most of us, it's like you kind of see the growth all over the state, and obviously Port St. Lucie's grown pretty fast. I mean, what is your stance as far as what are the pros and cons to the city's growth? Is there a way to do growth maybe more responsibly? Do you think we're doing it well right now? I mean, where do you stand on that issue?
So, I'll touch back on what you said. So my grandparents moved here in 2004. In 2004, we went through two hurricanes at that time, And right after that
Yeah.
is when I went to the Army. And, in those past 22 years, I've seen this city grow. The city has grown a lot. There's been a lot more houses, but the roads have not grown. So the roads are still horrible. There's still nothing to do here for the younger generation or for families, really, right? Everybody takes their money to West Palm Beach. And listen, there's nothing wrong with what West Palm Beach. However, I would love to keep the money here. Even, from a career perspective, there's no real jobs here. So we may have grown as far as residentially, but we haven't grown strategically, meaning the infrastructure hasn't kept pace with the growth. The jobs are really not here. We're the sixth largest. And I did some research last night, and they moved us into the fifth spot, right um, below Orlando, as far as the biggest cities in Florida. And for me, it's just unacceptable. There has to be things to do here for the younger generation. I've been looking at, hey, how can we bring musicians here? How can we bring comedians here? We have a Mid Florida Civic Center we're not leveraging. What about Top Golf? We just need real entertainment here. So we can have things for the families to do, for the younger generation to do. And my vision, is to really move us forward, into the future, and really have a good quality of life for everyone in Port St. Lucie.
You know what? That's an interesting point of view because obviously a lot of people realize the growth from like a numbers perspective, but I guess from like a cultural or an activities perspective, that's always been a trope really for a lot of people who, especially like if you've got friends and family who are born in or were raised in Port St. Lucie, that's been the trope for a long time. It's like one big neighborhood. And I think to your point about the growth and about the roads, maybe traffic is an issue to a lot of people. I mean, what is there a plan in the works now that you know of to tend to the traffic? Or I know there's different things like the half-cent tax that have done some of the infrastructure updates. I mean, where do you stand on like a plan to alleviate some of the traffic, grow the infrastructure?
Yeah, so I know right now the city has plans, and there's plans that are out to 2050, right? Like that just doesn't make sense. We're
Right.
talking about things that are happening 24 years from now. We need to find solutions in the near term, within the next 4 years and 10 years, as far as resolving some of these issues. Not just widening roads, because some of these main roads need to be widened, like St. Lucie West. However, there's other things we can do, and that's with the traffic lights and the timing. So there's a lot of things we can do, and I have already been investigating some of these things, and my plan is to really come in here, assess the situation, see what the plans actually are, and start providing recommendations and say, hey, look, we can't wait to 2050 for these improvements. Even to your point, they're building something back here in St. Lucie West. I believe it's a BMX park. It's a one-lane road back there. That means that the traffic is going to be horrendous. We should have invested in the infrastructure prior to then building this back there, because all they're doing is kicking the can down the road. And that's not how I like to do business. I'm a forward thinker. I like to, plan for these things and start making these decisions like, hey, we know that's coming in. Let's update the roads now so we can handle it and then build.
Yeah, I know that's the Tradition Regional Park there with the BMX. I've driven by that a few times just to see what the status is. I'm always kind of interested in uh, when it's gonna open, or people are always commenting in some of our Port St. Lucie Facebook group about when it's gonna be breaking ground or opening. And maybe that's a good opportunity to talk about like a lot of that area, especially like Tradition. You had mentioned like getting a more modern, like a Top Golf type of thing, or some more modern entertainment. They've got like Pop Stroke, and it looks like Tradition's brought in some newer, um, more state of the art or more modernized amenities and conveniences and brands than other spots. I mean, how do you think you draw those other activities into maybe other areas of Port St. Lucie that might be, maybe they're older, maybe it's more residential, and because I imagine with those come, like you had mentioned, more jobs also.
Yeah, so What I specifically was referring to as far as the track in St. Lucie West is in St. Lucie West. If I'm not mistaken, the plan is back here in St. Lucie West. They plan to create some type of entertainment park. From what I heard, it was BMX, and I know they already. If I'm not mistaken, they already have one in Tradition. Is that not correct, Josh?
I think that
That they
Tradition
started building
Regional,
one there too.
yeah, Tradition Regional Park is off near like what's that Cadence, the community and Tradition. It's right off Crosstown, but there's going to be a BMX track there. But I don't know. There's always different things. I know there was one up in I know Torino Regional Park was another one that they were talking about. So I don't know. There might have been one that I missed that's more like St. Lucie West proper.
Yeah, so I don't know if I lost you there, but yeah, there's one back here in Torino that I believe they're building. And from what I heard is, they're building, some stuff back here as well. And again, listen, it's not about what they're building at this point. It's about, you know, it's taking care of the infrastructure first. And I think that is the biggest point here, right? Is we need to make sure
Right.
we have the infrastructure in place to handle what they're building. Obviously, they've made a lot of decisions. They've been rezoning a lot of things too, which was just recently in the news. But the bottom line is we got to take care of the infrastructure. To go back to your initial question, if I'm not mistaken, was some of the other areas in Port St. Lucie and the growth there. Me personally, I'm against the minor league soccer stadium. It doesn't make sense to me. What I would have liked to see done is let's expand out the Mid Florida Civic Center. Let's have that a 10,000 seat venue. That's a multi-use venue then, right? Not just a single use for a soccer stadium and X, Y, and Z. If we really invested the money and built an entertainment district around the Mid Florida Civic Center, then we could have hosted other things like maybe potentially basketball tournaments or Disney on Ice or WWE, just different entertainment venues. And that's the biggest thing here is I just feel like the minor league soccer stadium was just not a good idea. We have a St. Lucie Mets here, that's barely 10%, if that. If you look at the parking lot when you drive by, obviously when the New York Mets come down here in spring training, it's busy for about a week or two, and it's very busy, and the traffic is a little crazy there too. And I experience it. I
Yeah.
live here, so I know. And that's what's going to happen in US 1. I was just on US 1 last week. I sat at a light for two changes, and the traffic barely moved. This stuff is just unacceptable. I just don't see I just don't understand what city hall is not seeing here, because I drive around, I'm in the streets, I see what happens. I knock, door to door. I go from small business to small business. I know what's actually happening here. And there's just a big disconnect between city hall and what people want. And that's why, I've been championing, hey, look, we need to start having town halls quarterly. Let's put a feedback button on the city site. Let's put, we have to open the lines of communication with the residents, because nobody should be running a city as a dictator and just say, hey, these are we're going to do this and this is what it is. Listen, that doesn't work for me. I'm sure it doesn't work for a lot of other residents, and I'm just unhappy with the leadership here. There needs to be a change.
I think, and just to, I mean, like you're St. Lucie West, it is interesting. St. Lucie West is like one of the, I mean, driving on St. Louis West Boulevard is quite possibly, it's got to be the most backed up road on the Treasure Coast. I mean, it's pretty wild sometimes how busy that can get. So like I'm curious, like, are there any other places, like I know we've talked a bit about infrastructure back and forth. Are there other areas that you feel deserve more maybe notice or investment, whether that's like public safety, you know, different types of parks or different types of infrastructure maybe that you feel we could allocate resources to or away from?
Well, I can tell you this. I know we're spending money on those flock cameras, red light cameras. I'm against them. I think that's, not only is it a waste of money, that's violating our rights. So, I'm against that. And I think, we could take that and put that into more of the community. I was thinking about, why doesn't the community, excuse me, why doesn't the city, offer like swimming lessons for the kids and for families? We live in Florida. There are pools here, and, to prevent drownings. And, I just think that everybody should learn how to swim, and we should offer those courses so we can help families, because everybody can't pay for swimming lessons, right? So, instead of wasting money in flock cameras, I would like to put it back into the community. There's also like Mustard Seed that's doing great things out here, and Sarah's Kitchen that's doing great things out here. For me, I really believe that, we could take this money and really put it back into the community and help the community, because, it's going to take all of us to change the narrative here, and to help one another. No single person's going to come in here and fix everything. It's going to take us all to come together and work together and do it all together.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think a lot of times it is interesting with the being the mayor, because you're one, you're part of the, there's other votes. You're a lot of people I think that you're just going to be banging a gavel, and that's what it is. So it's interesting that you say that. You've got to like be able to be a leader. You got to be able to get people to kind of see it from your point of view, and likewise listen to their point of view. And I wanted to, I don't want to reverse too much, but you had mentioned kind of like transparency and more frequent meetings. I mean, what would your thoughts be on like a more transparent government? I mean, would it be something like emails or in-person meetings, or how like what do you think that would look like?
So, for me, it's, as stated, town halls, right? Number one, it's not just me at the town halls. I think all of the elected leaders should be there to answer questions from their constituents, right? It should also be the chief of police, because if there's issues with, public safety, and residents have questions, he should be there as well to answer questions. And I just think it's obvious right now there's no transparency. It's just one direction, and that's coming from the leadership down to the people, whether that's, through the news, or through the city council meetings. And if you go to those city council meetings, you see people have 3 minutes to talk, and then it's next, and they're voting. And, that to me is just unacceptable. That's not how you run a successful business. You have to take input from the people. You have to know what's going on, and, again, town halls is one thing that I'm looking at doing. Feedback button on the city's website. So because listen, even if we have town halls and we have them in person and have them on live, still people are not going to be able to make it. I understand people have work so giving people the option to review those town halls on the city site, having a feedback button. I'm trying to open the flow of communication in every way possible. So whether that's, emailing them, or, posting all the videos on the site, my thing is with these town halls is we should also be discussing with the people, hey, look, this is our 90-day outlook. These are the things that are coming up. These are the decisions that we will be making. So we can, take in their input, and we can work with the community so they're aware of what's transpiring, and not just like how they did the soccer stadium and dropped it on us and said, hey, we've already voted. We did it within Florida law. We're moving forward, right? And that's just unacceptable for me, Josh.
What are your top three? What would you say your top three priorities are? Like if you were elected tomorrow,
Sure.
what do you think are the top three things that are most important to you?
So my big three is the infrastructure. Obviously, it's not just the traffic; it's the drainage as well, right? The drainage is not the best in Port St. Lucie. There's some parts of Port St. Lucie, if we have heavy rainfall and floods. I remember seeing before on in the news that people were in like canoes and jet skis, but that's just unacceptable, right? So the roads, the drainage, and the technology infrastructure. We have to update the technology infrastructure here as well. We're gonna have to protect and defend that as well. The second thing is the quality of life. I know we've discussed it, but there's really no jobs here. There's nothing for people to do here, and that's just unacceptable. So I'm gonna start looking at how we can improve the quality of life expeditiously for the people. And that means starting to make decisions day one, and that's going to impact the residents the fastest. And the third thing is the fiscal responsibility. I want to go through the budget. I want to look at everything that we're spending money on, and if it doesn't make sense, I'm going to cut it. And that's just what the reality is. There's a lot of issues here that I feel like that we're wasting money on. And as I stated, the red light cameras, the flock cameras, and I'm sure that's just the tip of the iceberg. I really want to get in there and work with the city manager, because the form of government that we're running here is a council manager form of government. The city manager is the one that's responsible for the budget and everything else, and he's actually the one in charge of these things. And that's something I'm looking at changing as well. We're the sixth largest city in Florida, and we're the only one still operating this way. This has been in place since 1961, when we had 300 people. We're approaching 300,000 people. We need to move forward. We need to catch up, and it's just unacceptable.
Yeah, that's funny. I had heard a couple people talk about that in the last year or two, or especially recently, changing that form of government. I mean, what do you? I mean, I don't want to like put you on the spot here, but what is that? What do you think that looks like? Would it not be like the city manager? Would it not be split up, or how would you see that? Would that be like a more appointed position, as the mayor is more of a formal position? How would that look, do you think?
Yeah, so and I've already started looking into these things, and my plan is a strong mayor, but it's going to be a hybrid model with a chief administrative officer. So it's still somewhat of using a council manager. However, the chief administrative officer reports to the mayor, so it's no longer the city manager, the making all the decisions, because that's unacceptable. In a strong mayor system where the mayor is the CEO, then guess what? I'm held accountable for everything that's transpiring in the city, and that's how it should be. If things are going good, then hey, guess what? The things are going good. But if the things are not going good, then somebody needs to be held accountable, and then that would be me. So that's why we just really need to update this. We need to get up with the times. 1961 was many moons ago, and that form of government is just outdated for this for the city, and we need to move forward and strategically and with everything, how we run our business. And I think that really shows how we're doing our business here, because no one accepts responsibility for anything. Everybody pushes everything. Oh, we didn't. Oh, I didn't have nothing to do. Oh, you're gonna have. That's unacceptable to me.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think that has caused a lot of apathy with people politically all over the place. And I think, kind of to your point, I think a lot of people might already assume that they're dealing with a kind of a strong mayor type of system. I think a lot of people do think that when they're voting for the mayor of any city, they're not voting for another council person, they're not voting for another commissioner, they think they're voting for the mayor. So it is kind of interesting. I think maybe just educating people in some aspect would do. I mean, people got jobs, they got families, they got kids, they got stuff to do, but it's hard to stay on
Sure.
top of everything. But either way, Eric, I'm interested to know, like, what do you think you would hope to see, like, 4 years, 10 years from now, if you were elected, let's say tomorrow? I mean, what changes would you see that you would say, hey, look, it's been a success as I've been mayor?
So, again, the strong mayor form of government would have to ultimately go to the voters, because we would have to change the city charter. So, obviously, I would propose that. But regardless, I would definitely get in here and look at our budget, see where we're wasting the money on, see how we can be a little more fiscally conservative, and ensure that we're making the best decisions with the people's money, because at the end of the day, it's the people's money. And to your point, right now, the mayor is just a spokesperson for the city. The mayor only has one vote, along with the other city councilmen and women, and and that's what the reality of it is today. Regardless of whether that changes or not, I will continue to push for a better quality of life. improved roads, ensure that we're growing responsibly, so we can improve our critical infrastructure. So, in 4 years, I'm really hoping that our infrastructure gets better, the quality of life's better, there's more jobs, more high paying jobs, and so everything improves here in Port St. Lucie because my goal, to your point, in the next 10 years, I want it to be that Port St. Lucie is, the best city on the East Coast, not just in Florida.
That's an awesome perspective. I think a lot of times people think in terms of like population. They think in terms of, I guess things that are much more quantitative, like how much of this, how many people, what's the housing cost, and they don't always think of it in terms of like the actual quality of life. Obviously, some of those things overlap. But before we wrap up, well, first let me ask you: is there anything that you want to touch on before we wrap up? Is there anything that you think people should know that we didn't get into?
Well, the big thing is I'm here for the people. I'm just here to be the people's voice. I care about people. I care about doing the right thing. You can look and see that, where others may have a past, the only past I have is of taking care of people. I've done that all my life. I've served people all of my life. And that's what I plan on continuing to do for the people of Port St. Lucie. And, the reason why I ran, just, as I stated in the beginning, is because I got tired of everything. There needs to be a change. We need to elect people in positions, in these positions that really care about the best interest of the people. I financially, refused. I financially funded my campaign by myself through my own retirement money. I have not accepted a single dollar from anyone. So, these are some of the biggest things. And, people can say what they want out there. This is all public information. People can go look this stuff up. I haven't accepted a dollar, and I'm the only one who has not accepted a dollar from anyone. This has all been my own money because I really believe in, helping the people and giving the people an opportunity to vote for someone that actually cares about them and actually cares about the direction of the city and improving the quality of life and the infrastructure and everything here. So those are, that's what I really want people to understand is I'm here for you. I really am here for you because I care.
I appreciate that, Eric. I think that's a good spot to finish it up at then. And I appreciate you being on. I appreciate you taking the time to talk and hopefully people watch this and get more of an idea of like who you are, what you stand for, and then they can make that decision come election day. And really thank you again for taking the time.
And thank you. And Josh, thank you for reaching out and thank you for having me. And, I really appreciate it.
Definitely, man.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Current by TreasureCoast.com. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Follow us on social media or visit TreasureCoast.com for local events, tips, and news. Have a guest or topic you'd love to hear on the show? Let us know at TreasureCoast.com. Until next time, keep riding the current and enjoying everything the Treasure Coast has to offer. See you soon.